Okay, in this video, I'm just going to quickly go through 3.1 and 3.2 homeworks. So it asks which of the following is interspecific competition. Interspecific is different species requiring the same resources. If they require different resources, they wouldn't really be competing. If it was the same species, the same species, it would be intraspecific. The total variety of all living things on Earth is described as biodiversity. Which of the you can also have local biodiversity, which is the different numbers of species in an ecosystem. Which of the following statements about a woodland describes the community? So that would be all of the population, so all the living things. And this, the best answer, obviously, would be the plants and the animals. And a rabbit feeds on grass, is eaten by foxes, and is a habitat for fleas. That sounds like a niche, because that is, in my vernacular, the hole that the rabbit leaves in the ecosystem if you take it out. It would no longer eat the grass, it would no longer be eaten by the foxes, and it would no longer be a habitat for fleas. Which of the following would competition not occur? So algae and fish in a loch need different things, whereas daisies and dandelions need space and light. Owls and foxes hunt for mice, so it's the same prey species, so they're going to have interspecific competition for that. And rabbits grazing in a field would have intraspecific competition for mates, for food, for water, for homes. Which of the following graphs shows the effect of competition for the same food between successful species and an unsuccessful species? So you would expect that this competition, so both would be affected, and that one would rise in population number and the other one would decrease. So graph C shows that. It shows one species over time increasing in population size and the other one trying to compete and then not managing. The tree creeper is a bird which feeds on small insects during the day. Which of the following is its niche? It's its role within the woodland ecosystem. A study has shown that Scottish river otter population is increasing after a fall over the last 40 years. Fantastic. Otters live along the banks of rivers, usually in reeds and gaps between tree roots. Fish are their main food. What is the term for the place where the otters live? That is their habitat. If you'd written holt or something, I could understand, but they want habitat. What disadvantage might otters have if reeds are removed? So they'll be exposed to predators, they'll no longer have shelter, they might not have anywhere to raise and give birth to their young, lots of things. So exposed to the elements, any of these kind of things. What effect would mink have on otter numbers if they feed on the same things? So it would decrease otter numbers because it's competition for food and for shelter. They're very similar sized predators. So a producer is a green plant. A carnivore is an organism which consumes only animals for energy. And a community is all the living organisms within a habitat. Describe the relationship in this between seawater at low tide distance and the average number of lugworms. It looks like as the distance from the seawater at low tide increases from 0 to 12, so does the average number of lugworms increase. As the difference in the seawater at low tide increases from 12 to 16, the average number appears to stay the same. So that's a mark. As the distance at low tide from 0 to 12, the average number increases from 0 to 29. So it's the same as the one before, but what they've done is they've given numbers. Instead of just describing the trend, so saying from 0 to 12 it gets more, they've said from 0 to 12 it goes from 0 lugworms, 29 lugworms. So if you have the opportunity to talk not just about the trend over time or over distance, do give numbers, okay? Calculate how many times greater the number of lugworms at 11 is compared to 12. So it's 27 compared to 9, which is 3 times greater. Rex and curlew are different species, so interspecific. Curlew and curlew is intraspecific. Rex and Dover is interspecific, so different species. So that is 3.1. And 3.2, we'll go through it quickly as well. So in this one, which line of the table correctly identifies biotic and abiotic factors affecting biodiversity? So D, because biotic would be predation. It would also include things like grazing, but abiotic is pH. It would also include things like temperature. The only one where both columns are correct is D. Which of the following only plants compete for? So D, light, space, and nutrition. Animals also compete for mates. Animals compete for mates. Animals compete for food. You could argue that animals compete for things like nutrients, so minerals and things, and for space. But hey ho. Which of the following pieces of equipment measures the abundance of daisies in a field? So B would be a quadrat. They're not moving, so you don't use a pitfall. You wouldn't use what's called the Tulgren funnel, and you use tree beating. It'd be very odd daisies if they were in a tree. Indicator species can provide information about levels of pollution in a river. So things like caddisfly larvae and some nymphs will only grow in quite low, only mate and live in low pollution environments, whereas things like the rat-tailed maggot and the sludge worm will only live in high polluted areas. So you can tell a lot from what is there, these indicator species. The size of a population of snails can be estimated using what's called the catch and recapture. So snail population is estimated to be 100 because we get 40, mark them, the next day 35 were collected, so 435s are something like 140 or something, and 14 were remarked, so 1,400 even. So yeah, that would make sense. 1,400 divided by 14 would give us 100, so it's B. Students used a quadrat to estimate the number of buttercups in a field. They threw the quadrat randomly 3 times. In order to improve reliability, they could have thrown it 10 times instead of 3. There's a point at which increasing the number gives a very low increase in reliability, but I think the difference between 3 and 10 is reasonable. For this one here, this is a very unpopular question from, I think, a 2014 paper. What's the average number of mussels found per square? The answer is 14. If you average these numbers, you get 14. What's the following as a biotic factor? So we're looking for ones that are only caused by living organisms. So pH is wrong, temperature is wrong, light intensity is wrong, moisture is wrong. They're all abiotic. pH is wrong, competition is right, predation is right, grazing intensity is correct, light intensity is wrong, correct, 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 and correct. So C. Technically it's grazing intensity, but grazing is fine for this. A source of error for pitfall traps is animals inside the trap eaten by birds. How can this be prevented? I would use a lid or cover. So number 10, in investigation, students estimate the population biomass of organisms. Complete the table to show the mass of one limpet. So we look at a limpet, population is 1100, and the overall biomass of that population is 33,000. If you divide 33,000 by 1,100, you get 30, which means on average, that's how much the limpet weighed in grams. Where are we? State which of the species is the least likely to compete with the small periwinkle. So we're looking at an overlap in their niche. So the small periwinkle has an overlap with edible and rough, these Littorina, but not with the flat periwinkle. Yeah, different positions on the shore. Using the information given, explain why competition between periwinkles is interspecific. It's because they're different species. It says in the question that they are different species. So interspecific. Question 11. So we're looking at this, Group A, B, and Group C. Complete the following table with the results from the area C. So the average number of mussels per quadrat. 4 plus 5 is 9, plus 6 is 15. Plus that is 5 is 20. If you divide that by 5, you get 4. So that's the average. The estimated number of mussels per meter squared. So here it must tell you that 4 quadrats is a meter squared. So the answer is 16. That's 4 and 4, 16. Which group has made an error in their sampling technique, which makes it less reliable? Say the error is made. So A, it looks like they've only used 2 quadrats. So that's not, it's therefore not reasonable to compare their results, which misses out this entire area here, with the other ones, groups B and C, which have a fairly good coverage except for group C missing this area here. So only use 2 quadrats, sample a larger area as an improvement, and throw more quadrats. This is an example that's actually in your booklet. So there's a video that explains how that's done. But in essential, legs versus no legs, those are the options. So for 2, you can see that go to 2 and go to 3 have already been occupied. So go to 4 is on the remaining. No spots on body. To get to this one, we had to go through legs and fewer than 12 legs. And when you get to that stage, we have these 2 here. We've got the beetle and the spider. The beetle has already been occupied in the table. It's got spots, so the non-spotty one must be the spider. Again, if we follow this through, question 4 is linked to the second option in question 1. So it's a no-legged organism, and the options here are shell or no shell. The earthworm is one that does not have a shell. We're almost there. Question 13. Name an abiotic fact other than temperature which would have measured in a woodland and describe the method for measuring it. So light intensity, soil pH, soil moisture. If you've gone with light intensity, you would talk about using a light meter. You would talk about maybe trying to avoid errors by not shading it. If you talked about a soil or a pH meter, the method is the same. It's putting it in to a consistent depth at each of the sample sites and making sure that you clean it off after use. So a mark for the factor and a mark for the method. During the survey, sample of leaf litter was done with pitfalls. However, checked pitfall traps and they were all empty. What error might they have done that means they didn't catch anything? So they might not have put a cover on top, so things might have either climbed out or been eaten. They might not have checked and emptied them regularly. You could put a preservative in. Lots of things like this that they could have. I think we're almost there. Question 14. Using the information above, what is the light intensity in the garden when the ground cover was 100%? So ground cover 100%, it's 2,000 lux because ground cover is 100. That's measuring 0.7. And if we follow that up, it's 2,000. So what percentage ground cover when it was at 750 lux? If we fall to 750 lux, it looks like that is at measuring 0.2, which gives us 65%. These are really tricky questions, so that's definitely an A question at National 5. What's the relationship between light intensity and percentage ground cover? So percentage ground cover, it looks like goes down, up, down. So it looks like the higher the light intensity, if we compare these two, the higher the percentage ground cover. So light intensity and percentage ground cover are correlated positively. The class was set a task of estimating the number of dandelions in a field. So this is the quadrat they used here. This is the quadrat they used here. This is the field. Which of the following is the best way of using the quadrat? To place it randomly in different sampling areas. Not to pick where you want to be or go where you think all the plants are. So calculate the average number of dandelions for each quadrat. So 3 plus 3 is 6, plus 6 is 12, plus 2 is 14, plus 1 is 15, plus 2 is 17, plus 3 is 20, plus 2 is 22. I may have summed that wrong, but anyway. Even then, that would give you an average of 2.2 once you divide it by 10, and you would round down because it's under 5. So we know that 2.4, you round down, and 2.5, you round up 3. I think finally, not finally, okay. The oxygen content is twice as great as sample 4 compared to